Hello, everybody. Happy Monday. Happy Monday. We're going to get right to it today. I hope you enjoyed your day. My name is Mr. Viteri. Let's go get it. So, I believe we were talking about monocultures our last lecture, and monocultures is basically having one type of crop. So, what is an alternative to that? What can we do to eliminate, not eliminate, but let's just say have a different method, maybe a more effective method, maybe a more sustainable method. Sustainable is a great word. Efficient is not necessarily the case because monocultures make it very, very efficient. So, therefore, that's why the prices are technically cheaper. However, is it sustainable in the long run? So monocultures are typically going to be something like corn. And let's say corn pulls a lot of nitrogen. If you plant nothing but corn year after year after year after year, you're going to absorb all that nitrogen out of the soil. And that's going to cause a problem because then you're going to definitely rely on fertilizers. In addition to that, if you have corn back to back, back to back, back to back years, you're going to have a significant amount of pests that have multi generationally uh, become familiar with the type of pesticides that you've been using. So you may have to actually increase the concentration of those pesticides. So, um, how can we make it better? What can we do? Well, we could do something called um, intercropping or something called crop rotation. So these are two different types of ideas. In intercropping, you're going to basically have two different types of plants, and they could actually benefit each other. So, like I was saying before, corn can pull a lot of nitrogen, but soy being a legume, could actually add nitrogen to the soil. And so now that you have two different crops, you might actually have two different types of pests, but they kind of have a barrier um, between like pathways. So it's not like they can just spread like wildfire. So this could be better in a way of keeping the soil sustainable, and it could potentially be a benefit in the long run. So it could be more sustainable. Now, crop rotation is another consideration. So let's say one year you plant corn, and then let's say you have a whole monoculture of corn. That's fine. You do it one year. The following year, you plant soy. So now you have a total different crop. Those pests that might have feasted on the corn may now die off, and now you have a new pest that that will take some time to generate. So I know I told you I raised chickens in my backyard. One of my concerns is salmonella poisoning or even mites, which are like little red flea-like things that go into, let's say, animals that are kept outside if they're not necessarily clean. Um, so if you have, let's say, chickens in your backyard year after year, then you just think about it. Like the chicken coop, even though you do clean it, there's gonna be some leftover excrement, some feces that perhaps are in the corner, and year after year, that's just gonna build up. So year after year, you're gonna potentially increase the likelihood of a disease spreading in your little hutch in the back with your chickens. You can think of that as disease being like a pest problem, if you will. And if you have the same crop over and over again, you're going to increase the likelihood of uh, that pest taking over. Okay. Now, I do want to make a special note that tilling, aka plowing, causes a tremendous amount of soil erosion. It's probably the worst thing you could do for the soil. And I was really thinking about it because I think about a lot of things. So check this out. So plants grow, they grow up, right? And they store sequester carbon in their leaf material or their plants in their stalks. And also they take, atmospheric type of carbon and now they're storing it into, let's say, an organic form, a living form, a solid form. Not only are they doing that, but they're also adding storing carbon in their roots and they're growing down into the ground. And so that's almost like a sequestering mechanism of carbon. Now, let's say we harvest the plant, we cut the tip off the plant, but there's still some sequestered carbon in the plant itself. Okay. Now, if we expose that soil till it up, then the roots die. They're exposed to the air. Now microbes are going to consume them, and now that air is going to be that once sequestered carbon is now going to be sequestered out into the atmosphere as well. So plowing, in essence, does cause some release of CO2. All right. Of course, we're not going to say the majority of it, but we could try to get rid of as much plowing as possible. So if we could leave the soil where it is, that's probably the best situation in that case. Okay. All right. Let's continue. Okay. So we're back, and our next image here is a great image to bring together a couple of topics that we've been talking about. And that's going to be more affluent countries and less affluent countries, or um, developed countries versus developing countries. Also, I guess you could say culture as well. So here we're seeing a graph on 2026 based on 2014 and 2016 consumption. And so let's look at North America. This is one of the outliers out here. In North America, we consume, and these are the type of livestock we're going to consume. We consume a lot of chicken, a lot of poultry. We consume a lot of pork, and we consume a lot of beef. If we're going to say which most, we consume the most chicken. Now let's compare that to other parts of the world. So in North America, that would include the United States and Canada. We eat more of this meat than many of the other countries, the European Union, Southeast Asia, the world. Okay, and we eat more than typically. That's weird, right? Shouldn't we? I guess this is an average. Okay, this is the world average, but we basically consume much more than the average person in the world. Asia and Pacific. So it's weird that Southeast Asia and Asia and the Pacific. So I believe this is going to be China, which is the most populous country in the world, eat significantly less meat than we do. Now, as they develop, we're seeing a rise in the amount of meat that's being consumed in China. That's of concern because if the average person eats as much meat as, let's say, an American person, we're going to have a bigger pull on environmental resources. Okay, our population is 350 million, roughly to 1.4 billion. Well, I think even 1.7 billion. That is going to be a significant change, and so we have to prepare for that. And I think we are preparing for that. And so there's a lot of talk about trying to try to eat a lot less meat. And and that could be considered a good thing health wise. We could debate that. We could debate you know, multiple things in regards to meat consumption. But what we can't, what's definitely certain is that we lose 90% efficiency as we go up the trophic chain. And so there's going to be more of demand of land if we're going to eat and consume more meat. Okay. And so here's just an interesting picture when you see stuff like that. Let's continue. So, what can we do to, or what have we been doing to satisfy our need for meat? So meat is extremely hard to raise and expensive. So we tried to streamline the process by creating something called CAFOs. Be familiar with CAFOs, okay? CAFOs, which is the acronym for Concentrated Animal Feeding Operations. Now, this means that we're going to have a significant large population of animals living in a small space. Food is typically shipped in, and they don't have a lot of space to move around and eat. And they're going to eat, and then they're going to defecate. They're going to defecate a lot. So now we have a large number of organisms that are in close proximity with each other, and there's a lot of feces that's going to be generated in there. So those are the bad things. Of course, the good things is that the animals grow relatively fast because there's not a lot of exercise. There's significant amount of excuse me, the significant amount of food, and so they grow relatively quickly. Now, so since they grow relatively quickly and you don't have to spend a lot of time gathering them and so on and so forth, this cheapens the price of that meat. So it makes it makes meat more affordable. All right. It also decreases something called overgrazing. And that's a weird thing. If I'm trying to find a pro of CAFOs, and that's what I'm trying to do, instead of having these cows, let's say, graze over areas, and sometimes they may pick a particular area and stay there, or if there's too many of them in one area, they may overgraze and pull out kill the grass by pulling it out or eating it faster than it could grow. Then that it will decrease overgrazing because now you're keeping the cows trapped in together. However, uh, when they are kept so close together, they tend to poop, and there's nobody out there, and so there could be piles of poop, and they're sitting and not sitting, they're standing in their poop. Could be sitting, and poop brings disease. Specific disease that I'm trying to allude to is something called E. coli. Okay, and there, if you've heard of E. coli breakouts in lettuce, I believe Taco Bell had a breakout in lettuce. I think Chipotle had a breakout of E. coli in their lettuce as well. How does this happen? What is it? Well, E. coli is a term used to describe bacteria that live in our gut. They live in our gut. They live in the gut of a lot of different creatures, a lot of different mammals. There's all different types of E. coli. E. coli are identified by a number sequence after the term E. coli. So Escherichia coli 231 or 237, so on and so forth. Now, what happens is when these organisms are living in close proximity with each other and they're defecating on each other, and they're eating, let's say, corn or a grain that's not necessarily grass, they they have a lot of stomach issues, and because they have a lot of stomach issues, um, and they're kept in close proximity to keep them healthy. Farmers typically give them antibiotics. So they're giving them antibiotics, and these antibiotics are to make sure that they don't spread disease from cow to cow because they're so close together. Because if one gets sick, all of them are getting sick. So let's just give them antibiotics. But the issue with that is if you're giving an animal antibiotics, the bacteria that naturally live in their body are going to try to survive. And once in a while, you're going to get some antibiotic resistant bacteria. So you will get eventually a bacterium that is resistant towards antibiotics, and now that's released into the world. And so think of it as an evolutionary process of bacteria trying to evolve to stay alive. And now that's in the feces. Now it rains, and let's say that water, the runoff from that area, is going to, let's say, run off into a particular crop. And so now we're talking about the leachate from the CAFO runoff that has this very dangerous bacteria, and now that's going to go and let's say water the crops of some lettuce nearby lettuce fields. Let's say now we take some of that lettuce, we chop it up, and then we consume it. Now we have this deadly. It could be deadly. It causes it could cause your uh, intestine to rupture. It could cause diarrhea. It could cause blood. Typically, diarrhea is really, really bad for babies. So I did hear some stories of some young kids dying, and it's really, really sad when you hear that. So that's one way or one avenue that could possibly happen. Also, having these extremely, and I'm not going to say all CAFOs are this way, but I do know there are some examples of some. So I'm not going to vilify all CAFOs, and I'm going to say like I'm going to get my meat from another area and blah blah blah. I do the best I can, but now I'm giving you this knowledge, so you do the best you can, and don't feel guilty about living your life because we all have to live our life. But anyhow, um, if the meat is sitting in the feces itself, then sometimes that E. coli is on the fur, and if it gets on the fur and then it gets in the meat, and let's say it's hamburger meat and now it's mixed in, you don't even notice. And if you don't cook your meat all the way through, then that E. coli can be consumed from eating the meat itself. So sometimes you get hamburgers that are infected with or have some of the bacteria of the E. coli. This could happen with chickens. This could happen with cattle. It could happen with pigs as well. Typically, when we do hear about it, it usually involves cattle and hamburger meat. So, what do you do when you have this antibiotic resistant E. coli? Since it's resistant to most of the antibiotics, we're trying to pull away from antibiotics, and that's why you hear the alternative, and the alternative would be grass fed, so their stomachs are not producing so many bacterium, and it's not they're not so gassy. And the other thing is that they're not using antibiotics, so therefore the area needs to be cleaner so the disease doesn't spread. And so there's also the double-edged sword there, is that organic meat is going to cost, and I've seen it cost significantly more expensive than, let's say, conventional type of meat. And we could talk about 50% upgrade up charges. We could talk even about 100% up charges. I believe, let's say drumsticks are maybe a dollar. They could be a dollar, and then they're $1.99 if you're getting organic drumsticks and chicken. I've seen them in those price ranges. So that's like 100% increase. And so whatever your finances are, um, and just make the decisions that you can. That's going to better your family, better society as a whole. All right. Okay, let's continue. So here is another picture of a CAFO. Notice the cows are really close to each other. Imagine the amount of feces that are involved in here. Now, feces is going to create a problem, and we need to take care of that. We need to put it in an area where it can be used. Now, that is a useful product. It could be fertilizer, but we have to ship it somewhere. Okay, and ew, can you imagine shipping something like that? So that's something that we need to take. You know. Uh, Consider when we're thinking about that. Now, another thing we need to consider is how we're trying to get rid of how we're trying to reduce our pull on meat, because cows are a significant contributor to methane, and the methane is a greenhouse gas that captures more infrared radiation than carbon dioxide. So we spoke about that before, so I don't want to dwell on that. So here's another picture of a CAFO. I would not Google search that unless you never want to eat meat again. Of course, don't don't get trapped by some images that are there's just like there are good things and bad things in all things. Don't just concentrate on the bad things. Look at the whole picture. Okay, look at the whole picture. Let's continue here. Okay, so how can we get rid of that manure? Now, I believe this is a pig farm. This could also be a poultry farm, probably a poultry farm, because poultry is really kept indoors, and then there's artificial light inside. Well, now imagine all that feces that's building up, and they're just walking around. They could be free range in there, which means they're not in cages. It doesn't mean that they're outside. If they're outside, that would be pasture. But anyhow, let's just imagine that there are a bunch of chickens in here, all loose, running around, and they're just defecating all over the place. Well, that place is going to be significantly stinky. So one thing that you could potentially do is take all that waste. You could perhaps pitch your land, the land inside of there. So now you can hose, and now you're going to hose all that feces into a tube, and now that tube is going to come out here, and this is going to be what's called an artificial lagoon. Say it. Lagoon. Say it. Lagoon. And that artificial lagoon is going to be where all your waste is going to be. Ew, I just smell it right now. It's disgusting. Okay. Now, so now this is a place where the sun is going to evaporate the water, and the feces is going to get concentrated, dry out. You could use it as fertilizer. You're going to have to ship it somewhere else. Sounds cool. Does have some potential downfalls, some trips. First off, like, who wants to drink this water? It's exposed to the you know world. Wildlife might be trying to drink it. Ducks may trying to fly in it, but that's not even a big thing. What would be a big thing? It would be, let's say there's a hurricane that hits this place, and this happens a lot in North Carolina. Hurricanes hit North Carolina. North Carolina has a lot of pig farms. We raise a lot of pigs in North Carolina. So when those hurricanes hit these artificial lagoons, if it keeps raining, they can actually rise. The so imagine all this water now spewing all out everywhere. And that's going to smell, and now we're going to have feces or sewage basically all over the place. That's not going to be a really good thing. Okay. So just know that this is one way that you could get rid of it. A pro is that farmers can use this as fertilizer whenever they want. However, it could be destroyed during a particular storm, and the waters can raise, and that feces can get loose and contaminate waterways and so on. All right. All right. Let's change the slide here. Okay. So, uh, let's do a comparison of artificial fertilizers and natural fertilizers. And so, synthetic versus natural. Synthetic just basically means fake or made or man made, typically, or woman made, typically. So, natural would be cow, chicken, fish, pig manure, like we spoke about before. It decomposes slower as opposed to very fast reacting. So, that could be a pro or a con because usually you just need to apply it once. All right. This adds to the soil's texture, adds to the volume of the soil. So instead of your soil just becoming lower and lower, it's pretty much going to add volume to your soil, which is really a good thing. Okay. Um, it does stink, of course, and it's less likely to wash out to cause eutrophication, but it can wash out and cause eutrophication. So understand that. Okay. Also, I guess you could throw in a natural. You do have potential for E. coli contamination. All right. Synthetic is usually uses fossil fuels to create. It is fast released, which is a good thing. But since it's fast released, it could also escape very easily. All right. This does not add to soil texture. It is expensive. Does require specific sprayers, mixers, chemicals. So it could be expensive. And it typically is involved in washing out and causing that eutrophication. All right. We spoke about eutrophication already. One of those reoccurring themes that I just always talk about. All right. Almost done here. Let's do about two more slides. Okay. Now, another part of that green revolution is the application of pesticides. Pesticides are going like if we didn't use any pesticides, I mean, you could have all of your crops destroyed by pests, but typically the number is 30%. So imagine losing 30% of your crops to pests. Okay, imagine losing all of your crops to pests. All right, and so farmers want to try to keep their crops, and so they're going to apply pesticides. So anything with a "icide" at the end means to kill. So pesticide is a general term. Herbicide, rodenticide, fungicide, herbicide. These are all terms to describe something that's going to kill something else. All right. Try to become familiar with organophosphates. This is just a group of pesticides. So, and chlorinated hydrocarbons. Two examples would be DDT, atrazine. I know these are complex terms. There's not too many. Just try to know those two at least. Okay. And then try to know other type of big terms like biological pest control. Now, so these would be chemical controls. They're using chemicals to destroy something. Biological control would be using something that is living to control the population. And so this would be something like praying mantises, ladybugs. This would be like getting a cat to get rid of rodents or having a number of cats to get rid of rodents. So biological pest control is a big term used to describe using living things to destroy other things. I'm going to highlight. Remember, we tried to get rid of the cane beetle when in Australia. Australia was growing sugarcane. They they also brought the cane beetle, and then we tried a biological control by bringing the cane toad and to get rid of the cane beetle, and then we just created a catastrophe. You got to be careful with your biological pest controls. If you're going to use a biological pest control, use a local native species that typically eats that species. You don't want to take something from another place and bring it and then cause a huge catastrophe. Okay, and another good thing that you could do is like physical nets. barriers, traps. You could set up a trap, catch a raccoon. You could set up a trap to catch a rabbit. You could put nets or build fences so your rabbits don't necessarily, so the rabbits can't get into your tomatoes, or the squirrels. The squirrels over here will get you here in Jersey. Um, and my chicken coop. When the raccoon took my chicken coop, I should have locked that coop up. I got a little overconfident, but that's when those raccoons will get you. It's a funny story. I'll tell you about that story. I'll tell you right now. Say I won't. I am. So I think it was 3 in the morning. I did I hear something? I did hear something. I hear and it was in my backyard. I look out my window and I tell you not, there was a family of raccoons. Big raccoon, middle-sized raccoon, and little raccoon. I jump up like I'm gonna do something, and I run outside, and I have to go around my house to the back, and I'm pretty much in my shorts, and like I'm really going to do something against three raccoons. Like it wasn't even a thought. It was like I'm gonna go save my chicken. But by the time I was there was just a trail of chickens. They took the chicken. I don't know how they did this. They took the chicken, the whole body of the chicken, over the fence. There was just feathers everywhere. It was just like a trail of feathers, and those raccoons stole my chicken, man. Uh, R.I.P., bro. R.I.P. Anyway, and that was in Colonia. All right. Okay, I think we're done for today. Great job, and enjoy your. Oh, let's finish on this one. Sorry about that. So, should we use chemical pesticides? Should we use just biological controls? Okay. Chemical pesticides are frowned upon. That's like DDT. Okay. That's like DDT. And we talked a lot about DDT. It stays in the system, especially if it's a POP, persistent organic pollutant. So we want to get away from from chemical pesticides. So, but sometimes we need them. So what can we do? We could do something called integrated pest management, which basically means that we're going to use every single method before chemicals. Okay. We might have to rely on chemicals afterwards, but this ensures that we're using the least amount of chemicals as possible. So we're going to use biological. And so these are all different methods that they can do. Soil preparation. You're going to prepare the soil. Maybe you're going to till it. I know I told you tilling is bad, but they're going to prepare it so no previous species is there. So now you don't have to use so many herbicides. You're going to try to forecast when the bugs would come. So maybe let's plant them before the bugs are going to come. You're going to have pest trapping. You're going to have biological controls. Now you're going to keep some records. Integrated pest management, beautiful word there. Uh, it wants to use the least amount of chemical pesticides. Okay, it wants to use the least amount of chemical pesticides. I lied. I want to do one more slide and then we're done. Okay, it wants to use the least amount of pesticides because we want to stop the pesticide treadmill. Okay, the pesticide treadmill is similar to how the E. coli become resistant to antibiotics and get stronger and stronger. Well, in the pesticide treadmill, the pests become stronger and stronger, more resistant towards the pesticide. And so if we don't use a lot of the pesticide, therefore we could slow down the pesticide treadmill. So let's look at this really quick. So so let's look at this right here. So here's the first generation of bugs here. This is before the first application. Now we applied the pesticide. Now we got most of them died. Okay, we just left these two. Okay, now later generations, it looks like the red one is the resistant one towards the pesticide. Okay, now you have to apply again a pesticide, but now look, the only one to survive is the one that's pest resistant. So the following year, after the third year, what are you gonna do? You have to change your concentration. You're gonna have to either increase the dosage of the pesticide to kill those organisms. And so if we get on this treadmill, it's just a constant more and more pesticides. And where's the threshold that it's going to eventually start to hurt us, or we have to switch? We have to switch from, let's say, pesticide A and use pesticide B, or use pesticide C and switch and switch and switch to try to get a chemical that necessarily works. So chemical pesticides are probably you don't want to rely on them. Okay, they are effective, but you definitely don't want to rely on them because it results in stronger and stronger pests. All right, I hope you enjoyed this lecture.